On this episode, I'm finally fixed the boost controller and turn up the boost. Okay, so you have to go back about a month to get to my last action-packed episode, and I say that sort of sarcastically, but you will notice that I was having boost controller issues, and at the time I had a 3-port Mac valve plumbed just like this, which how the instructions say and everything online says to plumb it too, but it just did not work. No matter the duty cycle I gave the Mac valve, it would never build boost. And upon thinking about it, it just doesn't make any sense. The pressure across the wastegate diaphragm is zero. There's no differential pressure when you're using boost pressure to attempt to control it like that. Everyone says it works, but for me, it just doesn't. Anyways, in trying to troubleshoot this, I found that I had melted a line down to the wastegate, and I fixed that and it still didn't make any boost, so I finally ended up plumbing it this way and just teeing it off between the two wastegates. So not controlling the top port at all, it's just left vented to atmosphere and only controlling the bottom ports of the wastegate with the Mac valve.
Okay, so I've got the boost controller plumbed a different way, and I need to run up to the dollar store to grab a couple things. And I figured I'd go ahead and take this car. It's Sunday after Christmas. There probably won't be a lot of traffic. And it's a really nice day outside. It's like supposed to be 75 today, which is ridiculous. This is insane. Anyways, I'm going to try and see if we can get some more boost out of this thing with it plumbed a different way. Okay, controller's on. I go 25%. See what we can get.
At 25% duty cycle, it didn't make any more boost than spring pressure. So I got a couple things from the dollar store that I needed and headed for home. I turned the boost controller up to 65% just as a test. Basically, I was trying to hit the boost cut limit in ECM, which at this point in time was set to 10 psi. And this was basically just to prove the theory that the system, plumbed this new way, could make more boost than spring pressure.
Second gear.
If you notice, I still had my foot in it, but all the power left the car. It's because I hit the boost limit in ECM, which is exactly what I was trying to do, and it killed the spark to it. So, I proved my theory here, and now it was just a matter of figuring out what duty cycle percentages equaled what PSI of boost. And in this clip, I'm getting on it in first gear, and the boost controller is set to a duty cycle of 40%.
First gear.
It's probably a little hard to hear in that clip, but the car was misfiring at higher RPM range, so I continued down the road to the gas station and filled the car up with gas just to eliminate that as a possibility since my gas gauge still doesn't work. And I headed back for home and put the boost controller on 52% this time.
Okay. This is 52%. Second gear.
So at 52%, the car makes 9.5 pounds of boost, and I think if it wasn't misfiring, it would be pulling pretty good here, but it was. So in my head, I really had three options. The first was valve float, the second being I was blowing the spark out from the gap in the spark plugs being too large, and the third was an actual ignition component breaking down. So I set about trying to diagnose which of these it is. And the first place I started was just looking at ignition components. I just wanted to look everything over and make sure that I hadn't done something like melted a spark plug wire. And I don't know if you can see this spark plug wire, but it was super loose on cylinder number 3, and you see how easily I just pulled it off right there. It wasn't even pushed up on there. Now, I had a really hard time getting it clicked back up on the spark plug, and I finally did. So I took the car for a test drive and put the boost controller back at 52% to see if that very simple thing was what my problem was. The car runs great on low boost. It would just only misfire under the additional load of higher boost, and that would make sense if the spark plug wire wasn't pushed up all the way. Obviously, that didn't fix it, so I drove up the road a little bit and turned around and then turned the boost controller all the way down and just did what I call a sanity check. And by that I mean make sure that the problem really only does exist at higher boost levels and that the car runs well on low boost. So that's what I did. So that was second gear, and third gear on spring pressure, which is 5 psi, and it runs fine. So I wanted to take another look at my spark plug wires because I had such a hard time getting that number 3 pushed back up on there, and when I went to pull it back off, the wire came apart inside of the ceramic boot. And you can see there's some like light hairline cracking on that one too, and I kind of wonder if it's from it being loose and rattling around. And so for me, that damned the whole set of spark plug wires. I didn't bother ohming them. I just bought a whole new set of fire core wires and installed them and then cranked the car up just to let it sit and run in the driveway. And it sounded pretty good sitting there running in the driveway. It honestly just sounded a little bit crisper and smoother, or even at operating temperature, but I was unable to drive it that evening as Tiffany was on her way out the door to go to work, and she works night shifts. So I hung out with Kenneth for the evening and then took it for a test drive at a later time. So obviously that didn't fix it. It still misfired even with the new plug wires, and I can already hear you people saying, Paul, why didn't you gap the plugs while you had the wires off? And that probably wasn't a bad idea, but I really like to only make one change at a time. So I knew I had a problem on the one spark plug wire and changed it, and then my next step was going to be plug gap. Well, fast forward about a month, and I hadn't touched the car. I just got really busy with other things. You can see some of my other YouTube videos about why. And I drove the car to my new shop one morning, and I had been driving the car every day for a few days and put about 200 miles on the car in the span of a few days. And one morning it decided it wanted to start misfiring regardless of if you were in boost or not, and even with the wastegate controller turned completely off, just regular around town light foot throttle cruising.
Let's see if I can't make it skip for you here.
And my fuel trims on this car started getting rather positive, more than they normally are. They picked up about 8 to 10% over what I normally see for fuel trims. So I ended up pulling the low pressure fuel filter. This car has 2 fuel pumps and multiple filters, and it just has like a little cheapo inline 3/8 20 micron filter after the low pressure pump at the tank. And you could blow through it with your mouth, but it definitely seemed like it had a restriction. So I ran up the street to O'Reilly's and grabbed a filter and put it on the car, and then pulled the car into the shop and yanked the plugs out. Checked them all. None of them seemed any different than the rest to make me think I had a single cylinder misfire going on, and I gapped them all from 32 down to 26. And after I did that, it seemed like the car was fixed. So I headed for home. I turned the boost controller on, put it about 38%, which is about 7.5 pounds of boost, and stood on it, and it took it. It didn't misfire. So that was trying to launch it on the street at higher boost, and you can see I spun the tires, pedaled it, and just let out of it. But I did make a higher boost pull on the way home in second gear, just rolling into it, and that is the following clip. And that was at 38% duty cycle on the boost controller, which netted about 7.5 pounds of boost, and I short shifted it like 5,200 RPM. But I think this is a good place to end the episode. The boost controller is working, the car is not misfiring under boost, and now I just need to make some suspension changes and tire pressure adjustments in order to try and get this thing to go down the street and not spin so badly. But that's all really great stuff for a whole another episode. This one has gotten too long, and I will see you guys there. Thanks for watching, as always.